Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another live presentation of SumerDaily. We got Tej Seth here again. He was here on Thursday, but I'm coming back today for just an excellent AFC West game that we had here. Tej, Chargers, Chiefs, two of the best teams in the AFC, period. Kind of a knockout, drag-out match for most of the game. What were your initial thoughts on this one?
I mean, all you can do is laugh at this point at the way that the Chiefs are winning these games. Like a doink off the crossbar to win the division is just it almost seems like it's scripted at this point with how close these Chiefs games are and how they keep pulling them out.
Yeah, I am an appreciator, as you know, Tej, of the doink. I think it's the best play in football. And of course, as it goes for the Chiefs, as it's gone all year, the doink goes in at the end of the game. The Chiefs end up winning in another comeback victory. They play the hits. I don't know if they're on autopilot at this point. Mahomes looked very good, but let's start off in the general. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. I picked out of something I really didn't love from them. It felt like they were establishing the run. They were trying to establish the run. Anytime they would have a successful run, they would really stick it for the early downs. And it really led to a pretty inconsistent early down performance from the Chargers. I think that's the reason they lost this game. What did you see from the Chargers on the early downs and the Chargers offense more generally?
Yeah, when you look at the Chargers offense in this game, like I think that Justin Herbert played a good game, all things considered. You have the situation right before halftime where he gets knocked out pretty good, has like more limited mobility the rest of the game, but he was still aggressive down the field with the ball. Like without Lad McConkey in this game, it was tough for him to have receiving options that he really trusted, but he did a good job of finding Josh Palmer down the field. Quentin Johnston played a much better game than he has these past couple weeks, and then just like a random assortment of tight ends was Herbert able to get the ball to also. And I agree with you, like. The drop back game was better than the run game in this matchup for the Chargers. So you probably would have wanted to see more of that on early downs and the late down performance that the Chargers had when they passed the ball in this game, especially with some of the explosiveness that they had in the second half really showed you why the ball should be in Herbert's hands more.
Right. Herbert for the game, 73rd percentile EPA. I liked what I saw from him, particularly in the second half, and they were able to kind of start getting it going. I really liked, you mentioned the tight ends. I really liked what I saw from Stone Smart. So let's flip it over to the Chargers defense side of the ball. I hate that Jesse Minter is not going to get the love that he deserves in this game. I thought they did a really good job of implementing a game plan. I thought they were able to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes all game. Excellent game from Khalil Mack. Joey Bosa goes out with an injury at the end of the game, but also some good performance from him. They've been seeing success with the front, particularly the two big defensive tackles as well. Cam Hart with a big play out there at cornerback. What were your thoughts on kind of how Jesse Minter handled Mahomes and how he handled this kind of more smash mouth Kansas City offense that we've been seeing?
I think Minter has done a fantastic job this entire season with this Chargers defense that didn't play well last year, didn't show up well in most efficiency metrics, and wasn't seen that highly coming into this season because you did have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, but you didn't have much outside of that. And now you have players like Cam Hart, Deion Henley, like just different players like that that are stepping up in this defense, able to play well. And for most of the game, they really were able to control what Mahomes in this offense was able to accomplish, where they were getting pressure and converting those pressure into sacks, which is something that is usually pretty tough to do on Mahomes. And they also were fitting the runs pretty well on early downs and not allowing explosive runs, which is something that the Chiefs were hoping for more of with Isaiah Pacheco back in the lineup. So you just still have to be impressed with what Minter has done for this defense and just some of the individual players that have stepped up that weren't seen as necessarily like high end players coming into this year.
Yeah, certainly. And to kind of close the book on the Chargers on this game, they're still sitting there in playoff position. I still think they're a very good team. I think this game kind of still again settles them in kind of the slight tier below the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, even to a certain degree, even though we've seen them be a little shakier in recent weeks. And the real thing is like they just don't have the talent at certain key positions, particularly the wide receiver position. We have a comment here about the offensive weapons not being too good. What I'm interested, especially as we start moving into the draft, Tej, to kind of close the book on the Chargers here, is like, what do you really think would most help them now on the offense? I'm assuming it's investment in the wide receiver position. Is there any other way, going into draft season, any strategies that they should be utilizing in places that they should be looking to upgrade there?
Definitely has to be the wide receiver position, as Milo pointed out in the chat here, where you have Lad McConkey, you already have hit on him, and he is for sure a number two receiver, possibly a wide receiver one. I think time will tell on that, and just complementing him with another receiver, I think can be really helpful for this team going forward. And you really have a lot of your offensive line positions figured out. So like leaning into a receiver or even a receiving tight end, of which there should be,
Right.
a decent amount of talent in this draft at that position, and then just someone else to also complement J.K. Dobbins in the backfield, where I don't think Gus Edwards is particularly that good of a rusher. Vidal has not been used that much this year.
Hmm.
He had 9 rushes in this game, but they weren't particularly efficient. So maybe some more of a back that they can trust more to pair with J.K. Dobbins, who I think is pretty good, but you can notice his absence in this offense right now.
Yeah.
It would be helpful for them on that side of the ball also.
Yeah, and you can check out all of our draft stuff, which is starting to trickle out. Matt Stopsky, super producer Matt Stopsky, has put out a couple mock drafts, but one for the Bears and then one kind of first round full mock there. You can check those out on sumersports.com. Milo comes back to us talking about Ashton Genty. There will be more Ashton Genty talk at the end, so just hold on with us. The last thing on the Chargers, I'm really interested, kind of just my eyes, like being an analyst as I'm watching the game. I felt as if they were able to get a lot more push on the gap scheme run stage. I wasn't really liking what I was seeing from the zone runs. I need to do a little bit more digging into the data, basically the last couple of weeks coming out of this game, but maybe something to look forward to moving on. And speaking of the run game, flip it to the Chiefs side. Isaiah Pacheco he's their guy. And he brings another thing to their offense. And this offense all year has been, pretty reliant on having a high success rate, given that so many people are trying to take away the big plays. Today, same story, 96th percentile success rate there. Very successful in the run game, 91st percentile there as well. All kind of four backs got involved. They were able to get Carson Strong, not Carson Strong. What's his name? I always flip it with Carson Strong and Carson, the
Carson
running back. Steele, yeah,
Steele, yeah.
the fullback. Um, they were able to get him on a fourth down run. P. Ryan has a good, catch and run. And then obviously Pacheco coming in. How are the Chiefs able to maintain this level of success rate? Would you put it solely on that kind of red wall that, Collinsworth was pointing out of the interior offensive line? Do you think it's just because of the approach that Minter took? How are they able to do this week over week, even in these tight games?
When you look at the Chiefs this year and you look at their early down splits versus their late down splits, you'll see that they are number one in EPA per play and success rate on late downs. And that includes being first in EPA per dropback and EPA per rush on late downs, where they're really strong in both of those categories. And there seems to be a clear understanding between Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, and the run game of when they are in got to have it situations. This offense will have some of their play calls that they feel more confident come in and be used. And then they'll also just have certain players step up where you have Mahomes make 2 amazing plays in this
Right.
game on late downs, especially on that last drive. You have Andy Reid dip into his bag, call one of the play calls that you could tell he felt more confident in to get that first down with Carson Steele that you mentioned. And so just like in late down situations, this Chiefs team seems to understand that they have the interior offensive line to do a really good job of actually getting a first down, but also just like that's when Mahomes and Kelsey seem to just turn it up a notch. With trying to just convert in these got to have it situations.
Right. And speaking of the gotta have it drive there at the end of the game, it's almost like a great album at this point. You know what you're going to get in those late ones. You're going to get sack avoidance from Mahomes. You're going to at some point get a scramble for a first down that basically puts them in a position to win the game immediately. And then you're going to get Travis Kelsey kind of magically getting open on kind of a broken play, scramble type play. And that basically those three things came together to just absolutely KO the Chargers at the end of the game, leading to the doink field goal. Like Milo chimes in here. He's talking about some other guys. I don't think it's like a serious argument that any of these guys are better than Mahomes. Obviously, this year has been a down year for him, but when he's able to put in these vintage, level plays, we know that the Chiefs kind of keep some stuff close to the chest, particularly as they move into the playoffs. Are the Chiefs on autopilot right now, or is there something that is different year to year, that's just different this year in Mahomes' play that is kind of keeping them in these tight games rather than having a massive point differential?
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting, right? Like when you have a team like the Chiefs, where if you were to strip away the name and what they've done the past couple of years, and just look at this team fundamentally in a vacuum, everyone would say that at 12-1 they were fraudulent. They were like the 2020 Steelers when they started 8-0, or the Vikings in 2022 when they kept
Exactly.
winning one score games. Like you would say that this Chiefs is the type of team that fits in that category where they're more lucky than actually good. But because it's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and because they're back-to-back Super Bowl champions and have shown that they can flip the switch in the playoffs, you still have to trust them a bit just going into the postseason. Just because they've had such a long, sustaining run of success here when doing that, and like when it's the Bills or the Ravens going into Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game, like I'm going to be inclined to want to pick the team on the road, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs end up winning that game. But it is tough to just see what this Chiefs team can be at their ceiling, because we haven't seen it yet
Right.
so far this year. But there can always be in the playoffs, like when Mahomes has better chemistry with Hopkins, and when he actually hits Xavier Worthy on a deep ball, like this Chiefs team might just feel better in the playoffs, just because like that's usually what they do. And it's usually just the type of journey that this team takes throughout the year.
Right. And at some point, some things just become a pattern. And at this point, there's been so many games this year, but in the course of the Mahomes Reed era, where they are able to do the same thing in the same way over and over and over again. And that extends even to the Super Bowl. So it's like, at what point does this not become a pattern and something that we can't really trust in? It's really tough because the end of games can be super variant. I mean, we had a doink field goal, could have easily not gone in, especially when you're playing an Arrowhead in December and January, where it's freezing cold and there's a lot of variance related to the weather as well. It can kind of start getting hard. Tej, any last thoughts on this game in particular?
Yeah, I mean the one thing that I'll say on this game is, like I think that these types of matchups where it's divisional matchups, it's back and forth, they're just like such good content to watch for us on football, or when we're watching football. Like I mean, both of these teams like will end up in the playoffs, and you hope that the Chargers will make it there. And it's just like I'm very excited to watch both of them going forward, because like especially if they match up again, because that was like a great matchup to watch.
Certainly.
Like it was a great chess match schematically, and just between some really good players on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and last thought from me, great game from Trent McDuffie. I thought he did a great job. He did get absolutely burnt by Josh Palmer on a nice little in-breaking route. Unfortunately, Herbert was not able to link up with him on that, but Trent McDuffie really dominated the first half, and that was what kept the game close as it was, particularly as the Chargers offense started heating up a little bit more. But let's move to college football, because now we're in the end of the college football season. The conference championships has been played. We do have a very good Army Navy game between two Army Navy games left over in the quote regular season, but there's it's awards time, it's playoff time. Let's start with the playoffs first, Tej. What are your general thoughts about how the playoffs, ended up setting up? I know there was a lot of chagrin on not letting Alabama in. I think that was the right move, even though I kind of love Jalen Milroe, would love to see him in that environment. I think it kind of played out as we wanted to play out, and I think that's a W for this system. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so, specifically on the Alabama SMU situation, because of the committee's rankings last week, where SMU was ranked higher than Alabama, and with the situation where SMU was playing a game this week and Alabama wasn't, the committee put themselves into a position where you couldn't drop SMU out of the playoff despite the loss, because then you would be setting a precedent that conference championship games could hurt you while
Right.
not playing on conference championship weekend could actually help you. Like the solution for that could be like the committee doesn't release rankings until the last one, like the one that would have been today, but then teams wouldn't know necessarily where they stack up, and there would be more confusion there. So it's a very tough problem for the college football as a landscape to be in. But I am glad that the SMU ended up getting in the playoff over Alabama, just because of that slippery slope that it might set if SMU was left out because of a ACC championship loss.
Yeah, and Milo's chiming in. Sam seems like he'd have Milroe QB1. I was talking about this today. I just, am trying to build my stack rank before I actually, dive super deep into draft season. Right now, I was mentioning to Matt Stopsky, I was like, I think I probably do have Milroe QB1 because of the scrambling, and I know he can be a guy that, at his worst is, a minus Justin Fields. Tej, do you have Shader as your QB1 right now? We're not going to hold you to this take, but how do you think the quarterback position lines up around draft season?
Yeah, Milo knows how to read me pretty easily here. I do have Shador as my quarterback one entering this draft season. I just think he's super accurate. He's mobile enough, and I've just really enjoyed watching him at Colorado, and think a lot of what he does can translate to the next level.
Yeah, it's I like what I see. I've always thought that he's a kind of more scrambly Baker to a certain degree. Like that's always been my comp for him. We'll see how it ends up once I'm able to dive deep into the film and the fits and everything. Really getting excited for draft season. And speaking of that Colorado team, we are on the same page on something, Tej. So I want to magnify both of our voices on this live, where I just do not understand the Ashton Genty, push. He's a great running back. Don't get me wrong. He's doing fantastic things. I also really love like the way he runs. It's almost in that kind of Kamara, Jameer Gibbs lane of he just has great contact balance, a good center of gravity. Is that people are just bounce off of him. Uh, but people have done this in the Mountain West many times before, and we haven't seen we haven't seen anyone do what Travis Hunter has done. Like the closest in recent years has like been Jabril Peppers, maybe. Like it's really tough to even come up with a comp for it. So tell me why you agree with me on this one, Tej.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're aligned here, because I feel like so much of Twitter, or just like my friends from high school and college, think that Ashton Genty should win Heisman. And I think your article pointed out really well why Travis Hunter should win Heisman, where you talked about how he's a 90th percentile receiver in the metrics that you guys have at Sumer, and he's also an 80th percentile corner. And so we're not just talking about a player that's just playing a lot of snaps like Ashton Genty's fans have been saying. Like, we're talking about a player who is really good on both sides of the ball and has the endurance to play at a high level on both sides of the ball. And that's what's really impressive to me, and something that we see probably like once every 15 years in college football. When it comes to Ashton Genty, like you mentioned, like we've seen other running backs have seasons like this before. Like Eric Hall on Twitter, like pointed out a really good point where he mentioned 2019 Jonathan Taylor was someone who had 2,000 yards, 20 plus touchdowns. He finished fifth in Heisman voting. 2017 Rashad Penny, one of my favorite running back seasons ever, 2,200 yards, 23 touchdowns, fifth in Heisman voting. Melvin Gordon in 2014 was the same way, 2,600 yards, 29 touchdowns, and second in Heisman voting. So that's where Genty will probably end up, second in Heisman voting. And I do think that it's a fair debate to have between those two guys. But we've seen an Ashton Genty type season once every couple of years. A Travis Hunter season happens much more rarely than that.
Right. Right. So I'm gonna run through some of the debates that people have brought up in this conversation, and just give me like a one sentence thesis to help the folks watching at home, dispel that if they are Travis Hunter guys like us. So the first one would be that, Ted McMillan is just as good of a wide receiver as Travis Hunter, and Will Johnson probably is just as good of a cornerback, but there is not even close to a running back that is as good as Ashton Genty. How would you come back at that?
Yeah, two things on that. Travis Hunter's doing it on both sides, so it's Ted McMillan and Will Johnson folded into one. And then I also think that Genty, like, there's other running backs that have been good this year. Cam Scatabo
Yeah,
has
that was the
led
one.
his team to the playoff himself, right? So I think that's like another thing to mention with Genty.
Okay. The next one. The running back position is very important in the college football game. And if you switched Travis Hunter onto the Boise State Broncos, they would not be as good as they are with Ashton Genty.
And this one is very hypothetical to me, where like the Colorado, like the run game like wasn't super utilized for them. It wasn't something that they really needed to be good for them to make the playoff. And then the other way around, like if you added a player like Travis Hunter to any team in college, like they would be really good because they're getting a top level receiver and corner all in one.
All right. Last one on this one. Travis Hunter has had poor games this year, and Ashton Genty has not had any poor games this year.
Yeah, I mean, there were games where Travis Hunter got injured early, and then like his stat line doesn't show up, as well, or because of the nature of the position he plays, like you need the offensive line to be somewhat functional to have a good day as a receiver. But like with Genty, like there have been games where his yards per carry has been really low, and that's partly because the box was stacked against him. But it also
Right.
shows like Boise State will just give him a lot of carries no matter what.
Certainly. So thank you for breaking that down for us, Tage. Before we let you off the horn here, I want to get your favorite moment from this football weekend.
I mean, favorite moment from this football weekend has to be like this Bills Rams game that we saw today, where you just had Matthew Stafford dealing like it was one of the best games I've ever seen him play. Puka Nakua was making some insane catches throughout the game. Like the run game was getting going with Blake Corum behind the interior offensive line, and then on the other end, like Josh Allen played one of the better games I've ever seen a quarterback play in a losing effort, and it was just like it was amazing offense to watch on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I got to give a huge shout out to Josh Allen. Everyone has a fantasy league, especially the one fantasy league. Typically, it's your home league. For me, it's certainly my home league. That is wild and crazy. I've had tough times in recent weeks, primarily because people are putting up like 150-point games against me. Just breaks the wrong way. Maybe we got to play with the rules next year, Tej. I know that you are very innovative in the rule set that you like to play in. So I had a very, very low probability of winning going in to that middle game slate. Josh Allen did me right, baby. 55 fantasy points. The other team had Puka Nakua, who had, I think, 41 fantasy points. But Josh Allen just been fantastic this year. I think, Tej, we were texting back and forth at the time. Like, that was a loss, and it felt like an MVP level game, even though
Yeah.
it was a loss. And so I just don't know who else can compete with him. And it's just fantastic to see him do so well. Do you have the same kind of view as me? Like, is it his MVP to lose at this point?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like he has just played amazing this year. And the narrative around the Bills coming into the year was they don't have Stephon Diggs anymore. Gabe Davis, who was another like leading receiver on that team and had gone to Jacksonville. Like who is Josh Allen going to throw to? And he's just like really put the team on his back this year. Will probably lead the league in total EPA, which is the biggest factor to me, and if a player should win an MVP. Like he probably won't get the one seed after today, so maybe that will hurt him. But I still believe he should win it regardless.
Yep, I'm on the same train as you. And that is Tej Seth coming at you. You can find him on Tuesdays and Thursdays on the Stats and Scheme podcast, part of the Sumer Sports Podcast Network. Super producer Matt Stopsky, many thanks to him. He's chiming in here. He disagrees with both me and Tej. He's a Cam Ward guy, and he wants Travis Hunter to go to the New York Giants. So thank you to everyone who followed along to our live presentation. You can check out all kinds of cool stuff on SumerSports.com coming to you this week. We have Sean Syed of the Stats and Scheme podcast, his Monday morning mashup, probably being published here shortly. You can find my hot sauce hot takes on Wednesday, probably coming out with some other draft content and great evergreen content for sports analytics. So Tej, thank you for joining us. Signing off, he's Tej Seth. I'm Sam Brookhouse from Sumer Sports. Thank y'all for listening.